Thanks for joining us once again. A great group of political analysts here talking about the message voters sent in the November election. As always, though, it's your opinion that is most important to us. So let's share some of your responses to our questions right now. Anthony has written me and says, the American people believed President Obama when he said he was going to be a bipartisan president who would reach across party lines. Now he will be forced to cross party lines to get anything done. Remember, he had it all, House and Senate. You don't need to look any further than to the president to understand why the people repudiated the Democrats. We'll get reaction to that in just a minute. But first, John says the Democrats lost for a number of reasons. That automatically means a number of messages were sent with the election. Some are about personality, some about tactics, some about philosophy and legislation. He says there's no single cause for the losses, but that several are key. And finally, from Paul, the message I think he says is to stop the bickering and get down to business. Bigger than any one party or any single candidate, I suspect people are tired of angry rhetoric and want appreciable results. So who can bring about those appreciable results? Well, we're going to ask that question. If you want to tell us what you think, you can email me at lynn@lynndoyle.net. Interesting, the variety of reactions that we got when we posed those questions. Those are just a sample. But in a lot of our responses, Sarah Palin's name came up and said that her influence really shaped this election. As representatives of the GOP, do you think that's a fair statement?
Listen, I think that she was out there. She energized our base, which was very, very important. It got people to really understand who was running, why they were running. So she was helpful. She was helpful in a lot of different ways.
Can she deliver the appreciable results that one of our viewers was looking for?
Well, I'm not sure she can deliver it. I mean, she's not an elected official. I mean, it's going to be an interest. Governing is going to be interesting. Certainly, there'll be a faction, a Tea Party faction within this Congress. However, I think more that those Republicans agree on than disagree on, and their message is pretty simple. Mm-hmm. Some, whether we're going to be able to repeal health care or not is an open question. But lowering spending, cutting back spending, is something that I would argue that the president needs to get on that train, because that's where it's headed.
Well, first things first, right? They have to agree on what the American people want. I mean, the message has been sent by the voters that they want something to be different, but now it has to be agreed upon as to what that different is. Is it jobs? Is it the economy? Is it repealing the health care? I mean, they're going to fight about what's important now.
Here's what I find interesting. Everyone speaks for the American people. Everybody that gets up, the American people have spoken. The American people are not a monolith, and a lot of people want a lot of different things, which is what makes it hard to govern in this country. But I also want to just go back to one of your Facebook respondents. Sure. They made the point about bipartisanship, and there's this general sentiment somehow that President Obama was unwilling to be bipartisan. When he first took office, I believe one of our U.S. senators, Republican senators, said our goal is to break President Obama. That's not bipartisanship. If you're sitting across the table from a group of people who have said they want to break you, that's problematic. Furthermore, what was said again most recently is the single most important goal for the Republican Congress is to make sure that President Obama doesn't get reelected. That doesn't sound very bipartisan to me. I thought the economy should be the single most important goal.
I think the big winner in this election was not Democrats and it wasn't Republicans. It was Sarah Palin. I think that, and I say this, is that I don't think you can show me where Tom DeLay, any of the Republicans anywhere, the speaker coming in, Mitch McConnell, show me where they made a difference in these elections. Sure, they poured tons and tons of money, but she actually went into primaries, backed people like Nikki Haley in South Carolina. She actually went and put her name on the line, and she paid dividends. But you have to understand her core base. Her core base is neoconservative. Does that translate to, independent women? That's the big question here. But let's talk about, now, as Brian said, there's going to be some Tea Party folks coming down here. Mm-hmm. There's a big question right now in front of the Congress. The number 3 spot right now, the conference chair, is open. And Michelle Bachmann, who is a huge Tea Partier, wants that position. So do the Republicans dance with who brought them there, or do they shun her? It's going to be an interesting fight.
Always a fight. Nothing's ever easy on Washington or anywhere on any other level at all. The Tea Party is interesting. You say that it was good for her, but in her home state, she wasn't able to pull off what she set out to do, and you wonder if that's, a reflection of things to come as well. We're going to move on because we could talk about Sarah Palin for the entire show. And I'm sure that's not what you guys came for. It's certainly not what I came to do, and it's not what the voters spoke. They spoke a little bit about that during November, but now we're going to move forward and talk about some of the local races and the impact that they'll have on all of our futures. Pennsylvania, for example, one of those states that plays a role in every election, whether it's midterm or presidential. You had the Republican win, and win handily. Tom Corbett's the governor-elect over the county executive, Dan Honorato. What does that say?
It says that now we have the governor's house, the mansion, we have the House and the Senate. It says that we're going to make some real big changes. I think Tom Corbett is coming in like Governor Christie. That's one of his mentors. He made that clear in his speech. He wants to see some differences here and make some things happen instead of the House, which was Democratic, to keep holding up issues over and over again. So there's going to be some big changes. We have a big deficit. He has to make some cuts, and he says he's not going to raise taxes.
The other interesting race in Pennsylvania, which also was of interest nationally, was that Pennsylvania U.S. Senate race, where Joe Sestak looked for a while like he was going to be able to pull off a big upset and take that seat from the Republicans. What do you think happened there? What did the voters say in that race?
Well, it's an interesting dynamic in that race because Admiral Sestak ran a congressional race that he shouldn't have really. It was a competitive race, and he won. Running for the U.S. Senate, I think tactically the Republicans beat him since day one. The day after he came out of that primary, they started beating on him. And it took for him a little bit of time to get up and run his ads. By that time, the race was pretty much shaped. He spent a lot of time in the last couple months, and he closed the gap. But look at the other candidate with Toomey, Club for Growth, not a moderate candidate. So that shows you a couple of the electorate that turned out on election day. We know a couple things. One was heavily senior,
right,
and it was also independent swung to Republicans. 6 out of 10 independents voted Republican. So the electorate was a little bit more conservative than it was moderate.
Well, for the first time in history in exit polling, 40% of the people, over 40%, identified themselves as conservatives, more than moderate.
That's right.
So there's no question that in this election, people saw as more conservative. By the way, to my friends over there, 20% identified themselves as liberals. I mean, so I think that the change that people are going to want is going to be dictated, I think, by where the mood is, and that's very much dictated by, I think, where the economy is.
It was also Toomey's message and where he went and where Sestak didn't go. Sestak really didn't go out west the way he really needed to go out west. Toomey was in the southeast every week, going to the minority churches. People really heard what he had to say. If you look at the African American church, we are conservative, no matter what anybody says. And they started buying into Toomey and not thinking he was a monster, because we had a meeting one-to-one with these African American preachers and grassroots activists.
All right.
Made a difference.
Toomey, actually, for people who might not have followed that race locally, if you're watching this nationally, he actually was the one that forced a longtime Republican U.S. Senator Arlen Specter out of the race. He switched parties and actually ran as a Democrat and ended up losing not only as a Democrat, but he was afraid he was going to lose the primary to Pat Toomey. So now we've lost Arlen Specter as a representative of the United States.
And then as a national, the race, Pennsylvania is a national race. I think what it showed, and I remember people sitting around this table in 2008 saying that Pennsylvania is no longer a swing state. This is a swing state, and it really showed that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, on that note, we got to go. We'll take a quick break. We're coming right back, though, and we're going to talk about another race, one that got national attention because it pitted a former NFL football player against an incumbent legislator. Who won? Stay with us and we'll talk about what that means and what the voters said with that choice.